Okay, I don't even know where to begin, but today, in case you needed a fresh reason to scream into the void, the UN has dropped a bombshell report. Though, let's be honest, by now it's more like a pebble in a pond given how Western media treats these things. The UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry has concluded that Israel has been systematically targeting sexual and reproductive healthcare facilities in Gaza, and wait for it, using sexual violence as a weapon of war. Not allegedly, not accused of, but concluded. The report explicitly states that Israel has committed genocidal acts by destroying reproductive healthcare facilities, imposing a siege, and denying humanitarian aid. In fact, let's quote the UN Commission's words directly. There is no escape from the conclusion that Israel has employed sexual and gender-based violence against Palestinians to terrorize them and perpetuate a system of oppression that undermines their right to self-determination. Male detainees were subjected to attacks targeting their sexual and reproductive organs and to rape. Female detainees were also subjected to sexual assault and threats to their lives. And if you're wondering how the media covered, or I should say failed to cover, this clear evidence of genocide, well, by now, you know the drill. This is how the media whitewashes genocide. Although the UN report clearly concluded that Israel has carried out sexual violence and genocidal acts, the Western media omitted genocidal acts and or uses scare quotes saying accuses instead of concludes, and in doing so amplifies denials by war criminals in order to undermine the report. Meanwhile, hundreds of Jews and allies today took over Trump Tower in New York City chanting, "We want justice, you say how, bring Mahmoud home now." Well, the reason they were doing this is because ICE just arrested Palestinian student Mahmoud Khalil, proving once again that in America, being Palestinian and speaking out against genocide, well, even if you're not Palestinian, and you speak out against the mass murder of children, for example, well, that justifies you being abducted and disappeared and stripped of your basic human rights and your constitutional rights. In 1948, Mahmoud's grandmother fled the Nakba, carrying his father inside her. She ran because the land beneath her feet had become somehow declared to be Israel, someone else's, because Palestinian existence, as hopefully you're learning by now, has somehow become a crime. His father was born in a refugee camp, a child of exile, before he had taken his first breath. And now, in 2025, in New York City, on Columbia's campus, Mahmoud's wife carries their child, nearly 9 months along, waiting in the home from which her husband was taken. And if you still think the rogue Israeli regime isn't running the show in the US, well, today's events should be more than enough proof. In the last 24 hours, the Israeli lobby pressured Donald Trump to stop the appointment of decorated veteran Daniel Davis, by the way, a retired army officer who was in line for a senior intelligence position in the Trump administration, was pulled from contention amid mounting opposition over his criticism of Israel. Davis, who's a fellow at the Koch-funded Defense Priorities think tank, was expected to be named to the position of Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Mission Integration until his appointment was abruptly withdrawn on Wednesday. And if that's not enough, Trump's own envoy for hostage negotiations, Adam Boehler, was just dropped from handling the Gaza hostage situation. His mistake being, he stated the obvious, that, well, why don't you just watch the clip?
Understand why Netanyahu, Dermer, others might be upset.
I do understand. I spoke with Ron, and I'm sympathetic. He has someone that he doesn't know well, making direct contact with Hamas. Maybe I would see them and say, look, they don't have horns growing out of their head. They're actually guys like us. They're pretty nice guys. So he doesn't know me, and there are big stakes. He lives in a country where if it sets certain precedents, then it will hurt or help a lot of other people. So I understand the consternation and the concern, and I wasn't upset. At the same time, we're the United States. We're not an agent of Israel. We have specific interests at play.
That was all it took to get axed, delineating between the United States of America, which supposedly is independent from Israel, and of course not falling into the whole like Hamas but Hamas boogeyman thing. And just to drive home how much control Israel wields over American institutions, let's talk about what happened in Miami. The mayor, Stephen Miner, just moved to cancel the lease of a tiny community theater. Why, you might ask? Well, because last week it had the audacity to screen the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land. Miner claims the film is, quote, an attack on Jewish people, which is interesting considering that half of the direction and production team is Jewish. But apparently acknowledging Palestinian suffering, even if you're Jewish, or Palestinian human rights, I don't know, basic human rights, is somehow now an act of anti-Semitism. And as if all of this weren't enough, let's just zoom out for a second. The UN's Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories, Michael Fakhri, has confirmed what many have already feared. It's no longer just about Gaza or Palestine or colonialism or occupation. It's sadly much, much bigger. The Israeli occupation forces now control, get this, more land in Syria, occupied land in Syria, than the total area of Lebanon, the occupied West Bank, and Gaza combined. They're blocking Syrian forces from having a military presence in southern Syria and are actively raiding homes, searching for weapons. And the UN Special Rapporteur on Food Security has called the starvation facing Gaza a man-made famine. And yet, the United States keeps sending more weapons, keeps blocking ceasefire resolutions, keeps ensuring that starvation remains Israeli policy, and keeps telling you, all the while, it's all part of a necessary war. And if all of this doesn't move you, if you're not outraged or alarmed, or if you don't realize what's at stake or what's happening, maybe hearing Donald Trump say the word Palestinian the way, a racist says the N-word will do the trick.
And Schumer is a Palestinian as far as I'm concerned. He's become a Palestinian. He used to be Jewish. He's not Jewish anymore. He's a Palestinian. Okay.
That's not a dog whistle. That's a siren. And the question is, can you hear it? When I almost get caught up in despair, I always remember that hope springs eternal. So I want to leave you with this. In Italy, some hope. Students in Torino organized an event in response to their university's hosting of yet another propaganda event trying to equate anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism.